Well, when I was growing up, I grew up in Salt Lake City, and every Sunday I would go to my grandparents' house, and my grandfather, his name was Lester Cannon, and he always would tell me about the days when he lived in Provo and went to the BY. It was always the BY. And he went to BYU, and he was a tremendous athlete at BYU. And what I always love and remember about my grandfather is that on Veterans Day, he served in World War II in the Navy, but today is also his birthday. And so he passed away 11 years ago, but I just adore my grandfather. And he was born in 1917, which makes today his 100th birthday. And I feel like being in Provo, we had to give a little shout out to my grandfather. So there you go. Thank you, yay. And I'm proud of my roots because, like I said, my maiden name is, I didn't say this, but my grandfather is a Cannon, and my maiden name is Cannon, and my roots run back through this grandfather right to George Q. Cannon. So I am a third great-granddaughter to George Q. Cannon, and I'm a fourth great-granddaughter to Brigham Young. And so my roots run right back to the heart of Mormon history here in Utah, and I feel like there was some seeds planted in those men and women way back that came down through the generations and really sprouted within me as I've gone back and studied their lives and how they feel about education. So I want to give you just a little bit of information about me and my education so that you know the context of where I'm coming from. Like I said, I grew up in Salt Lake City. I attended Brighton High School. Public schools worked for me pretty good. I served in student government positions. I played sports. I was the captain of the softball team, senior class president. And so I was able to utilize those resources growing up. And then I went to Utah State, and in my second year at Utah State, I was sitting in a psychology class, and our professor, it was nearing the end of the semester, and she said, look, we have 2 days till the exam, but if you want to come back to this auditorium tomorrow, I will run through my notes, and I'll tell you everything that you need to know for the test at the end of the week. And so I said, yes, I'm going to go get all the notes and everything I need to know to pass this exam. And I was sitting in the back of this auditorium with probably more than 100 students, and I was just taking notes, writing down everything I needed to know to pass the test. And all of a sudden, clear as day, I have this impression that came right into my head, about knocked me out of my chair. And it said, this is not education. And I've thought back on that moment so many times because it literally who said that, first of all? And what do you mean this is not education? I've been doing this my entire life. This is how I do education. I'm paying a lot of money to be here. So what are you talking about? Who's saying this? And oftentimes I think, sometimes we like to think maybe our ancestors are hanging around with us. And I have this just image in my mind of Brigham Young sitting there like, oh, this is so boring, and this is not education. And so maybe he was a little frustrated at that moment. But whatever it was, it caused me to ask a question. And we know how powerful it is when we ask questions. As soon as we ask a question, the universe and God's will aligns to provide answers. And so in that moment and the continuing years down the road, I asked myself, what is education then? What is it? What is education? And I started asking that question, and everything just piece by piece started coming. And for the last almost 18 years or so, I feel like that I have been able to get answers about this question, what is education? So moving on here, the other day I woke up and I was thinking, everyone's looking for solutions to education, the crisis in education. And what are we going to do to fix it? Do we need more teachers? Do we need more money? Different programs? How are we going to fix education? And this thought came to me, everyone's also looking for solutions to the health crisis in this country. Chronic diseases are on the rise, cancers are going up, heart disease, all these things are just coming down the pipe, and people are really worried, and they're marching for the cures, and they want someone to give us a cure. In the meantime, I think every doctor or naturopath would tell you there is a solution in a lot of ways, and it's applying the natural laws of health, which would be eat more vegetables, get out and exercise, eat more plant-based foods, give your body things that are from the earth that will help it to strengthen it, give it all the vitamins and minerals, and you will, it's not a guarantee, sure, it's not a cure, but everything says that your chances of living a long and healthy life go up. Okay? So there is a solution. People don't want to necessarily look at it and take that as an answer because it requires hard work. It requires sacrifice. It requires giving up Diet Coke and giving up sugar and some of those things that are really hard. So there is an answer that will help us in that area, but we don't really maybe want the answer. So then I was thinking, well, are there natural laws that govern education? Is there something on the table right now that's similar to that we could potentially apply, but it does require more work, it requires sacrifice, it's not the easy answer, and so forth? I would say yes. There are natural laws that govern education. And I know some people would say, oh, well, now you're getting into this idea about God and all that. But I want to just mention really fast, go study Cicero. Study Cicero, what he taught about natural law. Because Cicero, he was not a Jew, he was not a Christian, but he was living, he saw the Roman Republic kind of come down at the time of Julius Caesar, and then he saw the Roman Empire go up. Well, he was killed before it really went up. But he was talking about something called natural law. And Cicero noticed that there are laws that are already set up that govern this universe. They already are there, just like gravity, if I were to drop something. So this is what Cicero said about natural law. He said, there exists a law, not written down anywhere, but inborn in our hearts. A law that comes to us not by training or custom or reading, but by derivation and absorption and adoption from nature itself. A law which has come to us not from theory, but from practice, not from theory, but from practice, not by instruction, but by natural intuition. So there are laws that govern the universe, and maybe, there could be potentially laws that govern education. Are there? That's kind of something I would like to pose to you. Do you think there are natural laws that govern education? Yeah. So, well, I was thinking about and pondering about this, and I thought, well, is God in the business of education? Is God in the business of sending us to school? Yeah. He sent us here to this earth to go to school. This is our school. How's it going for you guys? At least you're here learning about school, but we are in this earth life, and we are here to learn. Our goal is to gain an education and to graduate someday and return back to our Heavenly Father. This is school. This is education. And I do believe that there are natural laws that govern education, and we know about them from the beginning. These laws include agency. We should have our freedom to choose. Responsibility. We ultimately are responsible for ourselves and what we're going to do here in this earth life. Self-government. Learning to govern ourselves. Moral uprightness. God expected us to figure out his commandments, read his word, and apply it in our lives so that we could live morally upright lives. He wanted us to honor God, or to honor him, and we need to have faith, and it's about family, sacrifice, hard work. We are supposed to produce and create while we're here on this earth. We are supposed to learn and become. But here's the kicker. There's no guarantee. There's risk involved. And God knew that. He knew very well, sending us to school, that there were some risks involved. And he knew that maybe we wouldn't be able to return back to him. But it was still his plan. It was the plan that we needed in order to have this education while we're here upon this earth. Well, just as there's the plan that God would approve of, there's always an opposition. And this plan, you'll see it throughout history. But I'm calling it today the force philosophy. What it looks like is no agency. It's based on force. There's a promise of security. It's about collectivism. No one's left behind in this type of idea, or at least the way they promote it. No one will be left behind. We're going to take everyone. We're going to get through this. We're all going to have eternal life, or we're all going to be saved. Everyone succeeds in this model, at least according to their philosophy. There are no moral absolutes, and there's no need for a God, because we're just going to take everyone and kind of push them through. All right. So in my study and learning and answering this question, what is education, I personally have gone back to history and tried to figure it out. I love to learn. And so since the beginning, we have been seeing this sort of contrast. So in the beginning, Lucifer was waving the force philosophy banner, and Jehovah was, of course, raising the freedom principle banner. Okay, a couple more. I have some people that were the same time period throughout history. So we know that Moses, same thing. He wanted to wave the freedom principle banner for the Israelites and said, we're going out. We're tired of being enforced and being told what to do and not having those freedoms. We're ready to have our agency back. We're ready to be responsible, to be morally upright, which they kind of waxed and waned on that. But they were ready to try it, and they were ready to take on the freedom principle. Okay, for those that are LDS, you see this theme in the Book of Mormon. It's based on the kingmen versus the freemen. The kingmen, it was about force. Let's have a king. Let's let him take care of us and force us along. And then you had those like Captain Moroni that were waving the freedom principle banner that said, no, I'm sorry. We want to be able to have our rights, our families. We want to be able to worship God how we want. All of these things, no, we're not letting them go. And of course, you know that created great battles over this idea. Okay, so this time of year, I love to remember the Maccabees as we go into celebrating Christmas and Hanukkah. This is a story that you should know and teach your children. So the Maccabees were living at a time when the Greeks had the rule over Jerusalem, and they stood up to the Greeks. And you know it started a little revolutionary war there, and they actually were able to win. And they wanted to wave that freedom principle banner and not be controlled by the Greeks anymore. And they did it for a while, 150 years. Of course, the Romans were waving the force philosophy banner the time of Jesus Christ when he was on the earth, and this didn't change, to the point where they ended up taking his life. So, of course, we love George Washington, and King George III was waving that force banner, and no, I will tax you, and we're going to keep control over these people that have left and gone over here. And George Washington said no. We're going to wave the freedom principle banner. We're ready. We want our agency. We want to be responsible. We're willing to take the sacrifice. This is how bad they wanted to be able to wave it and to live it. Of course, you see these philosophies in government. The Communist Manifesto would be a perfect example of the force philosophy, and the Constitution of the United States represents the freedom. Karl Marx, he was all about the force philosophy, and Joseph Smith, he taught the freedom principle. And we know this because of his teachings, but I love this quote, and I know you've probably heard it, but he said, I teach them correct principles, and they govern themselves. That doesn't sound like force at all. It sounds like teaching and giving the truth and letting us choose for ourselves. But Karl Marx, on the other hand, he said that unity is brought about by force. So we will make us unified, and we will do it, and we will control what happens. And of course, I had to throw this in for my boys, because you see it in pop culture as well. You see that there is a good and bad, dark side, light side, you know, Luke Skywalker versus Darth Vader. All right. So now we have a question to ask ourselves. Which idea is shaping public education in America today? What do you think? Well, they're using the exact same wording that they have since the beginning of time, which makes me a little nervous because they're saying the same things like, well, we're not going to leave anybody behind, the No Child Left Behind Act, and everyone succeeds. No one fails. We're going to take everyone and whoosh, we're going to get them through the system. And of course, we know that they have eliminated those moral absolutes that were once there. And no God, he's not invited there. Collectivism, and it is based on force. You know, in Utah, we still have a lot of freedom in some ways, but friends that I know in other states feel a lot of force, and even those that homeschool are still being very much controlled within the home and sending people in to watch what their children do and the testing and things that they require. But it wasn't always so. We didn't always wave the force philosophy banner in America. We actually used to wave the freedom principle banner in America. And this is a quote by Dr. Kimber. He said, America's first schools existed mainly within family units. The home was the classroom, and the subjects taught, as well as the methods used, reinforced the family's perception of the world. Their core curriculum included religious values, basic reading and writing, ciphering, math skills, and a little history and farm skills, which were pertinent to an agrarian society. So we used to wave the freedom principle banner in America. People had that freedom. They could educate their children how they wanted to. And what were the fruits when we were waving that banner? These are the fruits: freedom, prosperity, self-sufficiency, strong moral character, high literacy rates. And I'm not kidding. I have tried to read some of the literature from the 1800s, 1700s. Those people were smart. Their vocabulary was just way above what we're at today. They became top in industry, top in science. We climbed up to the highest standard of living in the world, and America became a light to the world. And people don't sometimes connect the two, but let's take a look at, really honestly, where were our children being educated at this time? One-room schoolhouses where the parents were paying a teacher to teach their children, or around the fireplace at night when they were reading the Bible as a family and learning these skills. Those were the fruits. And then, like always in history, someone says, no, let's change it. Let's try something different. And that was Horace Mann. So he lived in Massachusetts and served in the government within his own state and then eventually in Congress. Horace Mann wanted to have free public education for all children in America, and he wanted to secularize it and remove God from it, and that was his goal. He didn't see that vision unfold totally within his life, but there were people that carried on that vision. So let's take a look at some things that he said. He said that the public school is the greatest discovery made by man. And when will society, like a mother, take care of all of her children? So he was moving in a direction where he wanted to take everyone and kind of move them along this path, and he started to wave that forest philosophy banner once again in America. There was a lot of resistance then. Okay, this took a long time for the people to come around to accepting this, but he was starting to wave this. And at the same time, George Buchanan, who's my great-great-great-grandfather, was in Utah at this time, but he also served in Congress, but he was 10 years after Horace Mann. But he was there, and he was trying to help Utah to become a state, but he was very passionate about education, and he said, he totally disagreed with Horace Mann, that education which leaves out God is destitute of all true value. Okay, that's a little intense, but truly, that was what he thought. Satan is aware of the great power which a true system of education gives the people. He is therefore opposed to such a system. He knows full well that a generation trained in all true knowledge cannot be led by him, as they would be if their education were neglected. He therefore stirs up all the agencies under his control to do everything in their power to defeat the purposes of God in regard to the education of our children. Okay, so after Horace Mann comes John Dewey. And John Dewey was same contemporary to Ezra, Taft, Benson, same time period. And this was about the time when these ideals that Horace Mann really wanted actually started to come into practice. And John Dewey was an atheist, and he felt that schools should not include God, and we need to eliminate anything that has to do with God. So you know that they removed Bibles out of the schools, and eventually prayer became illegal. But it wasn't always so. Like I said, in America, we used to do those things. But now, because this forced philosophy banner starts being waved, and they got their wish, and that was to take those things away. So let's read what John Dewey, who he really was. Now this is tricky, and you have to really filter through this information, because you go search on Wikipedia, they're going to hold him up as the greatest man ever, that he started public schools, and he was this great thinker and philosopher, and that's what they teach at universities and schools. So you have to know where to look. Okay. But John Dewey said this: I believe that every teacher should realize the dignity of his calling, that he is a social servant set apart for the maintenance and proper social order and the securing of the right social growth. I believe that in this way, the teacher always is the prophet of the true God and the usherer in of the true kingdom of God. What is he saying? He doesn't believe in God, first of all. So what in the world is he talking about? He's saying that the teachers are supposed to bring forth this society and that they are working for the true God. It makes me a little nervous. And at the same time, Ezra Taft Benson was saying things like, I feel to warn you that one of the chief means of misleading our youth and destroying the family unit is our educational institutions. So, really fast. I don't have a slide for this, but what are the fruits of public education today? And if we look at the time when John Dewey had his ideals and philosophies that were coming forth, and then finally the Bible was taken out, prayer became illegal. And if you look at the statistics in this country, everything starts to change big time by 1950. We were still top in education, and then things start petering down. We come down the chart at that point. And of course, things like all of the things, drug use, pregnancy, abortion, moral absolutes, everything that you think would, it just in a declining society, start to really come forth. And nowadays, one of the biggest one that is just is ripping my heart out is the suicide rate. I mean, this is a real problem. Kids are so discouraged in life that they are taking their own lives. And that's where we come. So your teenagers actually have a choice in education, and you as parents do too. But I want your teenagers to understand that they do. Because if they own it and they get it, they will be powerful. Because they will understand that if they want to take the freedom principle banner and wave it, then there are certain rules to the game. You can't just say, well, I'm going to just homeschool and sit on the couch and do nothing and play video games all day, okay? That's not homeschooling according to the way that God would want it. There are guidelines if you want to choose to wave the freedom principle banner. What are they? Well, the same rules apply as in the beginning. So I want you to think of this from a teenager standpoint. What would happen if we give our teenagers agency? What if we teach them your responsibility to get an education? You need to self-govern yourself. If that phone is a problem for you, video games, let's get rid of it. You figure out a way to govern yourself. You've got to learn these skills. If you don't learn it as a teenager, you will struggle with it through your adult life. Let's start learning these skills. You need to be morally upright. If you choose this path and want to be successful at it, then raise the standard for yourself personally. You need to honor God, your family. Be willing to sacrifice. This isn't going to be an easy route, but you can accomplish great things. Hard work is part of it. You have an opportunity to produce and create and become. And again, there's no guarantee, but that was how Heavenly Father had it from the beginning, okay? So we have to understand the guidelines if we choose this path. So I would just like to say that I do think that truly the solution to all of the education struggles and the problems that we see in our day would be to go back to applying the natural laws of education. Like I said, we saw the fruits of what it was like when they were waving the freedom principle banner in this country. Everything, freedom, prosperity, top in industry, education, and everything kind of went up. Do you think because those natural laws, when we put them in place, actually produce blessings on the other side? Yeah. If you are a religious person, you know that God says when we keep the commandments and do his will, we will prosper in the land. And so everyone seems to be afraid that, well, my kids won't prosper. They won't have a job. They're going to be they won't know how to do anything. They're not going to be successful in life and a career. But you don't understand. You need to put these things into practice that are the natural laws, and they will naturally become successful. I've seen it. It's the most beautiful thing. And I want to tell you about 4 teenagers that I know that have truly done this, that are implementing the freedom principle in their life, and they are reaping the rewards of what they're doing. So one of them is my daughter, Addy, and she's going to talk to you in just a minute so you can kind of get a sense of what her education has been like. But Addy is 15, although she looks older, and she has been homeschooled since she was 7, and she loves horses, but she has been able to create a business. So she is running a business right now, and she loves to learn. She, to me, is really like the poster child of what can happen in freedom when you give a child freedom in their education, because I have not forced her at all. I have tried to help her just find her path and discover it, and she reads on her own, she learns on her own, and all of those things. She does it, and it works. Okay, so this is DArtagnan. He's my friend Cindy's son, and they live in Colorado. His dad owns a construction company, but he's only 15, and he knows how to drive a semi-truck. He can pull an engine from a car. He can fix it. He can do anything you need with your car. This past summer, his mom let him build a tiny house. So he built a house, and he learned how to do the plumbing. He learned how to do the electrical, everything he needed to know to build a tiny house, and he's 15. So he has so many skills right now that are valuable skills, and he is learning from his dad and also from his mom in the home, and he's homeschooled as well. So Jacob is Katie Hanson's son. Some of you know her, but he just recently left on a mission, and when he left on a mission, he had already written a book. So he has a book on Amazon, and it's called You Have a Dream, and you can look it up, but he is just 18 years old, but he's already printed and published a book, and now he's off serving his mission, okay? And my cute friend, Sarah Patterson, she is in Cedar City, and she's actually 21 now. But when she was 12, she told her mom and dad, I want to start a farm. And they said, okay. So they let her start to grow some vegetables, and she sold 5 shares of her farm. And so she was letting people, so they were coming and getting the shares of her farm. Well, what happened in time is that it grew and grew, and more people wanted shares of what she was growing. And so her parents left their jobs and helped Sarah, and they worked for her by the time she was 14, 15 years old, and she started what's called Red Acre Farms. And it's the biggest co-op or farm share in Cedar City, Utah right now, where I'm from. And she is wonderfully successful, and she was homeschooled, so it opened up all these wonderful opportunities. Oh, I'm going to start a farm. Who just does that? And so she's still running a successful business now as a 21-year-old, and there you go. To me, that just shows that there is power and potential in allowing youth to have freedom. They have to catch a vision that they can do more, that they can be more, but it's there, and they can become wonderful humans, and they can be successful if they apply the natural laws of education. And the last thing I want to say before I have Addy come up is that truly, for those of you that aren't from Utah, or maybe on the recording and people that are watching this later, if you feel like you don't have that freedom principle in the state where you live in, then come to Utah. I used to live in Colorado, and truly, Utah to me is the most wonderful place to live if you want to do something different for your education. There are people in this room right now that I probably can't even talk about them without getting choked up, that are carrying this banner in so many ways right now. They are waving it, and we have members here on the state school board that are homeschool moms that are holding back things so that we can choose to still educate our children the way we want to. And they're getting ridiculed and persecuted for who they are and what they stand for and the way they educate their children. And yet they are holding back this wall for us to wave this banner. And they're waving it for us. And what Oak is doing, and Jenny Baker with Gathering Families, and all these wonderful people here are holding this banner up for you. So are we going to take it, or are we just going to go along with the same system everyone else is doing? There is options. And that is all I have to say. So thank you. Okay, I'd like to have Addy come up. She's just going to talk for a brief few minutes. And I thought, hey, if you guys can actually see in practice what this looks like, it would be good. So,
well, I am waving that freedom principle in my education. I am very passionate about it, just like my mother. One of my most favorite quotes, and I love this quote so much that I took the time to memorize it so I could tell people when I talked to them about this. And it's by Heber C. Kimball. And he said, "When the flowers begin to bloom on the mountainsides, the ladies try to imitate them with artificial ones. Which would you rather possess in education, the real flower or the artificial one? Would you not rather have an education direct from heaven rather than the artificial one of the world? One educates the head and the heart, the other the head alone." And to me in my education, I feel that I am that real flower. And as I've looked at the difference between these two flowers, there are differences. The real flower has roots. It is grounded and it grows. It needs sunlight in its life. It needs God's help in order to fulfill its mission and its purpose. The artificial flower, on the other hand, is at a standstill. It can't grow, it can't progress, and it doesn't have that passion. It doesn't want to become better. It doesn't want to be educated in this way. But in my life, my education has looked very different. And I tell youth all the time, I have many friends who are homeschooled, and I have many friends who do go to public school. But as I share my story with them, it's hard for them to understand sometimes because this education is different. And you know what? I love it. I love it so much. And I love the quote, "You inspire, not require." I've seen this with even various homeschool moms, that what curriculum is going to be right for my kids in the homeschooling industry and world. But really, it is your child's. It's their mission. They figure it out themselves. That's what I've come to discover. I've had great mentors in my life who have taught me true and correct principles, and I love it. But the thing is, Christ taught in this way too. He didn't force it, he showed the way. And this is the truth in education. My mom, the way she teaches me, she doesn't sit me down and say, do this, do that. Because I've come to the point in my life, I want to know it. I want to be educated because I want it. I want to be able to teach people about this way. And I love it so much. I love learning about my heroes, Benjamin Franklin, John Jay, Thomas Jefferson, George Buchanan. All of these men, I aspire to be like them. And as I've thought of this flower, I am a real flower, and I am different from all the other flowers of my day, but I am in this garden with all these other flowers. And you know what? I'm looking at some of the flowers, and some of the flowers are big sunflowers. They're huge, they're beautiful. They're big hollyhocks that have grown to a huge height. And you know what? Those are my heroes in life. And I look to those flowers as I'm that little flower that wants to be like them, and I know I can become what they have been. And I look at them, and I see that they have trusted God in their life. That's what makes them great, because they have had the Son in their life. And I'm starting out on that path as well. And I love it with all my heart. I love this education. It has blessed my life tremendously. I know that this is the way God wants us to learn. He shows the way. And I am forever grateful that I am blessed with this education, and for my amazing mother and parents who teach me truth and teach me in the home. And I know that's blessed my life.